This video is sponsored by Audible. So no matter if you're flying something like this, which is the DJI Mavic Mini, or here we have the Mavic Air 2, there's definitely a lot of safety precautions you're going to want to take, not only before you fly, but also when your drone is up in the air. Now, if you're an experienced flyer, of course, a lot of this might be very familiar to you. However, if you are new to flying, new to drones in general, I wanted to compile this list of a bunch of tips that I'll be able to learn while I was flying. Hopefully it'll help you guys out there when you're in the field. And before we get into this video, a few words from our sponsor. And for those that aren't familiar with, Audible is a leading provider in audiobooks, podcasts, wellness programs. They have thousands of titles spread across a bunch of different genres. Throughout the day, I've been listening to this one called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett. And the main reason why I chose this audiobook is because if you guys don't already know, I'm a user experience designer during the day. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is how we use the design thinking principles that would normally be used for technology and software. How do we use that in our everyday lives? Now, besides some of the audiobooks that I'm listening to, there's also another section on their website called stories.audible.com. That's really beneficial for me because I'm homeschooling a first grader and a third grader, so I'm always trying to find different ways to entertain them in between some of those gaps during school. There's hundreds of titles that they're able to stream, and it's really made for caregivers, educators, parents. And like I said earlier, it's really helpful for us as we're trying to fill in a lot of these gaps throughout the day. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Audible for sponsoring this video. And to start, get your free 30-day Audible trial and get one free audiobook and access to Audible Originals. Simply go to audible.com/FlytPath or text the word FlytPath to 500-500. Also, links will be down below in the video description. And now back to the video. Now for my first tip, I'm actually going to start here in the car, mainly because I see a lot of new flyers do this. They will take their drone out, put it right here, like on top of my car or even on my hood, and try to fly from inside of your car. Now, although you might see a lot of people doing this, I highly recommend not doing it, mainly for a few different reasons. Now, the first reason is because of the reception from your remote control to your drone. Now, when you're flying from somewhere like inside of your car, you might have some interference and some disruption between the signal between your remote control, which is coming from the top here, to your drone. Second thing too is line of sight. You want to be able to see your drone. So if you are in a car, you're not normally always going to be able to see if the drone's above you, mainly because you have something like this in your way. Now, I do know a lot of people that do fly from inside of the car, mainly because of course this is a little bit more of a controlled environment. So if you did have to fly from the inside of your car, make sure you have another person with you, have a passenger that can actually stay as your spotter while your drone is up in the air. Now, of course, when you get your drone for the very first time, you want to take it to all the very popular spots. I'm here in very loud downtown San Diego, and I'm here because when I first got my drone, this is one of the places I really wanted to shoot. I wanted to show people how beautiful our town is, how nice the skyline is. But the one thing you have to realize when you're flying, especially something like this, which is the Mavic Mini, which is based off of Wi-Fi, you're definitely going to run into a lot of interference, especially if you're flying around high buildings or anything that might block line of sight between your remote control and your drone. So even before you get your very first drone, you want to know, where am I going to be flying it? Is it going to be somewhere like this, downtown, where there's a lot of buildings, might have a lot of interference? If so, then the Mavic Mini might not be your best bet. You might want to look into something like the Mavic Air 2 or the Mavic 2 Pro or Mavic 2 Zoom lineup. The OcuSync 2 technology has a lot stronger transmission frequency between the remote control and the drone itself. And if you want to know some of the differences between the Mavic Mini and the Mavic Air 2, I made a video about all of that. Make sure you check out the link above as well as down below in the video description. So if you are new to flying, I highly suggest you wait on flying in areas like this, mainly because of the fact, like I said earlier, you might get a lot of interference, especially if you're trying to fly up and around buildings. The next common mistake I see a lot of new pilots do is they want to take off from the hood or the very top of your car. Now, while it might seem like a cool thing to do, it's actually a very dangerous thing to do, mainly because of the fact that you have the compass here at the very bottom of your drone. Now, by taking off from the roof or the hood of your car, you might get some magnetic interference, and you definitely don't want that because it will affect your flight characteristics as well as your GPS with your drone. So for this tip, do not launch off of the hood or the roof of your car. I don't care how cool you think you look. It's not going to look cool when you get up in the air and you have GPS or any characteristic issues while you're flying your drone. So don't fly it off of your hood or the roof of your car. Now, once you get outside, you want to look for a bunch of different things. You want to see if there's any tall trees, any high buildings. But the one thing you want to look out for too is any power line. Now, I have power lines right here in front of me. It's actually a common area I like to fly in, but I normally don't fly around it. I'll normally walk it out into the park. But you also want to look a few hundred feet out. If you plan on flying in any particular direction, you want to see if there's any power lines out there, because when you are up in the air and you are pointed down, you're definitely not going to be able to see that through the camera on your drone, especially when you're looking at something like this, which is a really small phone. I'd probably say one of the biggest tips, and this is probably one of the most obvious as well, is maintain line of sight. Now, what does line of sight really mean? Well, it means exactly that. You want to be able to maintain visual line of sight between you and the drone. Now, one of the best things about these drones is this right here. I'm not touching the sticks, it's running off the GPS, it's just sitting there hovering. And that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people take it for granted and don't do visual line of sight, because they assume already that the drone, wherever it is just gonna sit there and hover. But like I mentioned, some other tips, line of sight might not be there, especially if you're flying from inside of a car, or if you're flying your drone around the hillside or a building. Keep line of sight. That is probably one of the biggest tips that people will just overlook because they feel way too comfortable flying, mainly because it's super easy to do, especially if you have a GPS drone. Now, if you have good connection with your remote control and your drone, the one thing you should do, especially if you're out there and you're not able to really see your drone, you're not in really good line of sight, or you just might have lost it in the sky, the first thing you should do is let go of the sticks. If you have good GPS lock, the drone should just sit there in the middle of the air and just hover. So the one thing you don't want to do is panic. You don't want to try flying it and just see where it's at. You want to stop, let go of the sticks, and ideally, just like here, if my drone is nearby, of course, if you're going to be way out there, let go of the sticks, and if you have good GPS lock, your drone should just hover there. Now, of course, I'm showing it to you just here really close, but ideally the same thing works if you're really, really far away. See where you're at, let the drone hover, and then scan the area, try to find a landmark, get yourself reoriented, and then of course fly back to you if need be. Now, when you're out there flying and you want to bring your drone back, of course, there's a bunch of different ways to return to home, but ideally I like to always fly my drone back manually. Now, one of the techniques I like to do when I'm flying out there, and as you can see, I'm about 1,000 feet away, what I will normally always do is switch this from the view mode from the camera view and switch it to the map view. And clicking here at the very bottom gives me my map view. Now, as you can see here, there's a little line that's drawn from my takeoff point or my home point to where exactly the drone is at. Now, what I like to do here is make it very simple for yourself. As you can see, the drone is pointed away from me right now. What I'll do is I'll turn the drone around. Now, even though I have line of sight, it's still 1,000 feet away and it's pretty much kind of lost in the sky. I can see a little tiny dot right there. But if you are flying out there and you completely lose it, which happens a lot of times, all you have to do here is to get a direct line home. First and foremost, make sure there's nothing in your way. Make sure there's no buildings, no mountains or hills that you're gonna run into. And then bring your drone up just a little bit and take that line straight back home. So just orient your drone to turn back towards that home point. And now all I have to do is just press forward and follow that line all the way back home. Then once you see your drone close by, you can hear it, you can see it, you can switch it back to the camera view again, and then position yourself into a nice safe area for returning home and landing. Now, my next tip is one I learned early on. Now, when you are flying your drone and if you see that you might have a little bit of weak signal, so if you start seeing at the very top here that your RC reception might be weak, the transmission between your remote control and your drone might show a 1 bar or 2 bars, or just showing that it's a really weak signal. The first thing I'll normally do is bring my drone up in the air a little bit higher. Ideally, when you are a little bit higher, you'll have a better reception from your remote control to your drone. So if you are flying at say 50 to 100 feet up in the air and you see that you might have a little bit of a weak signal, first and foremost, like I said in my last tip, let go of the sticks, see where you are in space, and then bring your drone up slowly a little bit higher. Ideally, when it gets up a little bit higher, then your drone and your remote control should have a better connection. Now, I talked about magnetic interference in some of my previous tips. Now, what does that mean and what do you do if you have some issues with it? Now, if you look through your app when you launch it, when you launch your DJI Fly app or your DJI Go 4 app, you might see on the very top left, there might say something like compass calibration needed. Right here on the very top, as you can see, it's in red. If I click on that, it'll say now compass error, and what you're going to want to do is recalibrate your drone. Now, to recalibrate your drone, all you have to do is press on the compass error warning at the very top of the app. Now here you'll hit calibration. So what you want to do is to do the compass calibration, hit start. And here it'll show me a little illustration of what to do, how to calibrate the compass. What you're going to want to do is pick up your drone and turn it 360. So all you have to do is pick it up and turn it 360 just like that. And then it has another photo that comes up. It'll say rotate the aircraft 360 vertically. So now what you do is you want to point the drone up in the air, and then now turn it again in 360, just like that. And there you go, calibration successful. Put it back down on a flat surface away from any metal objects. And as you can see here, my pre-flight check is normal, which means I'm safe to fly. Now, this next tip is not really for beginners. It is hand launching and hand catching your drone. Now, like I said, this isn't something I normally would recommend. I do have a full video about hand launching and hand catching. Make sure you guys check out that video above as well as down below. But you are gonna find yourself in different areas where you might not have a really good flat surface to take off and land from. So while it does take some practice, I definitely recommend you practicing it, understanding what is happening, what the sensors are doing, just in case you find yourself in situations where you cannot easily land and take off on a flat surface. So once you get used to it, it does get pretty simple. All you have to do is bring the drone towards you. And what you're gonna wanna do now is have the drone facing away from you, then bring it in a little bit closer. And once it's about a few feet above, the sensors will then sense you below it. What you're gonna wanna do is bring your hand right underneath it. I'm still about a couple feet away from the drone. Bring your hand right underneath it, and with that left stick, bring it down. And once the drone senses your hand, keep holding that left stick down, just like that. So keep your left stick down, keep your hand underneath the drone a couple feet up. What's gonna happen is that the sensors will assume that your hand is the ground and automatically engage landing mode. Once it goes into landing mode, it'll slowly go down, and if your hand is there, it'll slowly lower right into the palm of your hand. Keep that left stick down, then your motors will then turn off. And like I said, it's a little bit more of an advanced move, so I definitely don't recommend doing it if you aren't familiar with your drone, but you're gonna wanna practice that mainly because you're not gonna find yourself in ideal situations all the time. You might find yourself in places where you're not able to take off and land. Hand catching it, hand launching it is a very common thing to do, but you have to be very, very careful. So for more details on hand launching and hand catching, make sure you guys check out my other video. And there's just a few tips to get you going, especially if you are new to this field. Now, of course, I can keep going with these tips. As you guys know, there's nothing better than to have a safe flight. So of course, I'm not covering everything that's possible, and I know a lot of you guys have a lot of your own safety tips out there. So if you guys want to include those, please add your favorite safety tip down below in the video description. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. And also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos. This is Ultra Anastacio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.